Welcome to Changed, the podcast that's all about the stories that shape us, the moments that move us, and the growth that keeps us evolving. I'm your host, Megan Galloway, and each week we'll dive into powerful stories of transformation. Because the truth is, change is constant, and it's what we do with it that defines who we are. So whether it's a major life shift or the subtle everyday changes that lead us to something bigger, this podcast is here to inspire, challenge, and celebrate the journey of becoming. Hello, and welcome back to Changed. I'm Megan Galloway. I'm your host, and today I'm so excited to have a dear friend, Andy Storch, here with me today. Andy is the author of a book that's called Own Your Career, Own Your Life. And he is an author, he's a speaker, he's a facilitator, he's a coach. He's definitely a connector. Andy has connected me with so many amazing people inside of my career and my life. He hosts his own podcast, many podcasts now, I believe. One that I've guested on called the Talent Development Hot Seat Podcast. And Andy as a person has absolutely blown me away in the last, I would say, especially 6 months that I've gotten to know him more deeply. He has been through so many incredible things in his life. He's a cancer survivor. He also is an expat. He lives currently in Barcelona in Spain. He loves to cycle. I love watching his Strava rides and catching some of those things. He's a husband and a father, and he is a friend, and I can attest, he's a very good friend at that. So I'm so grateful that you're here today, Andy.
Megan, thank you so much for that very kind introduction. I really appreciate that. And it really has been lovely getting to know you a lot more over the last year, probably. And, we've done some podcast interviews. We've had a lot of chats. We almost got together once in person, and it will hopefully happen at some point. But just really supporting each other, rooting for each other, connecting, talking about different things. You're just someone that I greatly admire as well. And I'm honored to be here.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I know we were so close to meeting in person. I was meant to come to Orlando, Florida. Andy hosts this incredible conference called the Talent Development Think Tank Conference. And I was so excited. I was going to be speaking. And the night before I was meant to get on a plane, I ended up in the hospital with a kidney infection and I could not come, and I was devastated. But it was one of those moments where if that would have happened with anybody else, I think it would have been a lot harder, because your reaction to that, Andy, I am forever grateful to you for how you responded to me, how you took care of me as a human being first. And it made going through a really hard situation, a really hard health situation, so much easier, because I knew you had my back on the other side. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, 100%. I mean, what else am I going to do? You're sick. You got to take care of your health. I can always find people to fill slots at a conference. And I think I told you, I experienced the same challenge some 4 months earlier. In May last year, I was meant to speak, invited to speak at a small event my friend Mike Kim was hosting for entrepreneurs. And I flew from Barcelona to Miami for the event. And on the plane, I got terribly ill. And let me tell you, it stinks being sick. It's worse being sick on a plane for 8 hours or not 10 hours, however long that flight is. And I spent the next 2 days in bed, and I never made it to the event. It got well enough to speak at the next event, which was ATD in New Orleans. But yeah, I've missed it. And he was just as kind and was like, hey, don't worry about it. We'll fill the slot. Just get some rest and get better. And we'll figure out a time to get together another time. That's all you can do. We just got to support each other. The events, the work, the whatever, that stuff will be there. But, our relationships, our health, those are the most important things.
They really are. Well, let's dive into the episode. And I love to start every single one of these with a question, which is, what is the one defining moment that has changed you most as a person, as a human being?
Well, there's been a few, and I would say one was going back to 2016 when I first got into personal development. I was listening to a podcast and heard a man named Elrod, who wrote a book called The Miracle Morning, talking about his morning routine. And I realized that I had never gotten into any type of personal development stuff before. And it was just something that I really needed at that time. And I went and got the book right away and started practicing the Miracle Morning, following his instructions in the book, which essentially is that you get up an hour earlier than you need to start your day intentionally with things like meditation, visualization, affirmations, reading, journaling, and exercise. And I'd always been big into health and fitness and exercise, but I'd never done any meditation, not much journaling. I like to read, but I wasn't making enough time for it. And that really shifted how I approached my day and my life. And it caused me to start doing a lot more reflection and reading and listening to a lot more podcasts and learning a lot of things that led to more career changes and life changes for me, realizing that I wanted to move more towards being an entrepreneur and doing other things. So that was a very big pivotal moment that kind of changed my life, just listening to a podcast like this one. The second, I would say, is one that probably changed a lot of people's lives, which was the pandemic in March 2020, because I was running a business flying around facilitating workshops in person, and everything kind of went away. And I needed to, that was my first big test as an entrepreneur, to kind of scramble and figure out, okay, what I'm going to do differently. How do I get some work together? And I shifted a lot of the things I did. I also really, you know, drew upon the mindset I had been developing to be able to handle challenges like that. And it, as you know, created a lot more virtual work for people, which allowed me to do different things like move my family to Spain and still be able to run a business, doing speaking and running workshops mostly virtually. So that really was a life changer. And then the other one was later in 2020, just as I was about to publish my book, I found out I had testicular cancer, and I had surgery 2 days after I published my book. Later found out the cancer spread to my stomach and my neck. So I went through treatment and a lot of research and, some hard times as I was battling that cancer, essentially healing my body. And I'm completely healthy today through it. But I learned some good lessons going through that. And it's certainly, I think, most people who have gone through cancer or any very challenging disease, as you know, will usually say that it's changed them in some way or another.
Mhm. So when you zoom out and you look at all three of those experiences, what sticks out to you as something like that makes a defining moment for you in your life? Like, what is it about it that makes you feel like you actually listened to that podcast and started doing miracle mornings
Yeah.
and or took the leap into entrepreneurship and or changed a lot of things about how you approach your health, in this instance, having cancer and being forced to do so? Like,
Right.
what do you think about those moments is common for you about what makes change for you personally?
Well, things are changing for all of us all the time. The world's changing all the time. We're all going through different experiences that can, have the potential to be life changing. And as you're saying that, I'm thinking, I mean, there's kind of two types of defining moments in this case. There's the one that we didn't choose, like cancer or a pandemic, right? That we only get to choose how we respond to. And then there's the types where we do kind of get to choose, like my first example of hearing the podcast. I could have heard that podcast and then moved on to the next podcast and did nothing, right? But instead, I bought the book, I read it, I started practicing what Hal Elrod recommended. And I've thought about this a lot. There's a saying that luck is essentially the intersection of where preparation meets timing. And I think so many times in our lives we're presented with certain opportunities. Many of them come from the things that we've done or set ourselves up for in the past. But it's up to us whether we take advantage of those or not. And I'm sure there's been many that we've both passed on, that everybody's passed on, and some you see people that are very successful, and it's because an opportunity was in front of them. They took a chance and they took advantage of it. And I'm so grateful that I did take advantage of that. I went and got the book and I turned it into an opportunity to make my life better. At the same time, I also think we have an opportunity, say the word opportunity a lot. I think we can, with the right mindset, turn challenges into opportunities. And so I think about all the opportunities that came out of the pandemic and the opportunity that's come out of my cancer experience to be able to help others going through similar experiences, to be able to talk about it, to be able to build, my experience in overcoming challenges to show that, hey, I can overcome a lot of things. And hopefully I can teach and inspire other people to do that as well. And I think that as we overcome challenges, it qualifies us to be able to help other people who go through similar things. And that's one of the big reasons those challenges are there. And that is us turning those challenges into opportunities to help others to make our lives better, whatever it may be.
Mm, that's beautiful. And I think you're right in that way. I do believe you have a choice either way, right? Like whether the change that's upon you is something that you're choosing or whether it's something that you're not choosing in any way, like a very challenging health problem. You do have this opportunity that comes out of it to decide how you want to live your life in that moment because you didn't have to choose the exact path that you took with the pandemic or with your cancer journey. Like there are
You know,
things that you could have done very differently in both of those situations. And I do believe like when you go through those really hard times, that's when you genuinely get to choose who you're going to be next because
Mhm.
it's like when you're going through those really, really hard things, and I say this coming from a place of like, I just said I had this like kidney infection back in November, and then it triggered this whole timeline of really challenging health events for myself personally to the point where I've had to like be in a wheelchair at times, like had a lot of significant troubles walking. It's
Mhm.
been a journey. And part of what I feel like I've learned through some of that too is like when you go through these really hard things and all of the extras in life are stripped away and you just like get down to this like bare minimum of how am I going to take care of myself today so that I can keep moving into tomorrow and the day after that. I feel like you get this opportunity to really decide like how do I want to approach this in this moment so that I feel proud of who I am today and that I show up for myself in ways that are genuinely important to me as a person with my
Mhm.
values. I think it
Mhm.
just for some reason, it's so much more abundantly clear in that moment that you have an opportunity to choose, and those
Yeah.
choices might change your path, you know?
Yeah. No, you really do, and it makes a big impact for you in your life. You also have an opportunity to set an example for your family, for people around you, and you as a parent are setting an example for your kids every day. How would you want them to respond to similar situations? They're seeing how you're responding to things. You as, a wife and a friend to many people, you also create a lot of content. You're an influential person online. So, like, how do you show up for people? You have an opportunity to make an impact to influence others in how you respond. I'm curious, Megan, I know you have been through some really challenging health stuff recently that started with that kidney infection. And I think those health challenges can be difficult and frustrating for anybody. I feel like they're especially frustrating when you're an active, ambitious person, like I know we both are, and you're like, "No, I wanna be doing these things." Like, when I found out I had cancer, as I said, it was, like, right before I was publishing my book, and I was like, "No, this is really annoying. I'm trying to, do a bunch of podcast interviews and market my book right now. I don't wanna go through this." But then again, when is there ever a convenient time to have cancer? So I'm curious, as you've been dealing with these, I would say frustrating situations, like what are you telling yourself? How do you think about it and approach it so that you can get through it and set a good example for those around you?
Mm. Well, I do wanna hear your answer to this too, for what you did back then and or how you approach this now.
Yeah.
And for me, thank you for asking the question, podcast guest to host. I will say one of the things that I keep telling myself as a very ambitious person who like wants to be pedal to the metal
Yeah.
all the time. One of the things I keep telling myself is like, just because I'm not doing all the things that I want to do right now doesn't mean that they're not going to happen. I really think that I'm meant to slow down for a minute right now. Like
Mm.
I'm meant to slow down to get more perspective. I'm meant to slow down to reevaluate what things are most important to me. I'm meant to slow down and just see who I am without all of the other things around me because then I really get to choose what's next. Like right
Mhm.
now at the moment of like, I think when our body is telling us to slow down, it's like this reflective place of not necessarily being back into creation and like going and pushing hard towards all of the execution of the things I want to do. But it's a moment of like hibernation a little bit, you know? And it doesn't mean that I'm not going to come out on the other side of it, but it just means that the best thing for me right now is for me to, like, listen to my body and slow down mentally as well as slowing down physically, and I fought it at first, but the more I fought it, the harder life just felt, and
Mhm.
the biggest thing that I've learned is I can't compare to who I was 4 months ago, for example. Like, I
Yeah.
ran a marathon 4 months ago, and now I can't go over 3,000 steps a day, or I
Right.
will, like, hurt tremendously,
Yeah.
and one of the things that I've had to learn is, like, I'm not gonna compare myself to who I was 4 months ago, because if I'm gonna do that every day, all I'm gonna do is feel defeated.
Yeah.
So if I just look at this version of me today and give myself grace for where I'm at today and say, "What does good look like for me in this moment right now?"
Mhm.
Then I can have a great day, and then I can start being more optimistic about what tomorrow can look like.
Mhm.
And maybe I'll get back to that place. I hope I do. Maybe I
Mhm.
won't. But even if I don't, I could still live a beautiful life that could be just different than what I used to have. And there's definitely grieving that comes along with that, but it's also
Mhm.
this, like, beautiful reminder of what's truly important, which you already said at the beginning of this podcast, right? Like, it's about, like, am I a healthy person for the most part? Yes, I am.
Mhm.
Do I have challenges? Yes, I do. A lot of people do. But what's most important is that I have my beautiful family around me. I have 2 young kids that are watching me go through these things, and I get extra time with them right now. those are the things, like, I've had so many friends that have been so kind and checked in on me, and you being one of those people, Andy, who's been, like, so supportive through this, and I've
Mhm.
just, like, seen all the beautiful value of community, and I'm a giver, but I've had to be forced into being a receiver, and I'm so appreciative for that because it
Mhm.
made me uncomfortable, and it's made me grow in a different way of having to learn how to receive graciously instead of just leaning on the fact that I love to give to other people now.
Yeah, I love that. I think you're right on. When I was going through challenging times in 2021 and I really just wanted to be working and building my business, I had a coach at the time who said to me, "Your body is telling you it needs to slow down and heal right now, and that is what you need to do because that's the highest priority, not your business, but your health and your family." And I was like, "Ah, yeah, you're right." It's kind of a good reminder that what are the most important things to us, and are we really giving time to that? And sometimes we're getting signals that that is the case. I would also remind myself, or what I think about these things is that I didn't choose this, but I get to choose how I respond, right? I didn't choose this. I wouldn't have chosen it if I got another chance, right? But I get to choose how I respond and I can take ownership of the situation. I'm big on personal responsibility. I wrote a book called Own Your Career, Own Your Life. I'm big on taking ownership of situations. So I thought, okay, well, this is the first test to show, am I living by example? And can I take ownership of this situation, even if it's one I wouldn't have chosen? And I think we can do that in any situation, whether it's a tough work situation, relationship, whatever it may be. It doesn't make it easy, but I'm going to go out and do research. And so, I started reading a bunch of books about cancer and health and nutrition, trying to learn everything I can to do my best to go through this process as healthily and quickly as possible to heal my body because there's zero chance that I'm not going to get better. I've got to be there for my family and I've got a lot of goals and things I want to accomplish in life. But it starts with taking ownership for me. And then also, there was a mantra that I learned from my friend Lauren Davis, who said she had a mantra that she used going through hard stuff that I kept remembering, which is, "This is how it is right now." It's a good reminder of the nature of impermanence. Like most things don't last forever. And so on the hardest days when I could barely walk and I was in a ton of pain, I just kept saying, "Well, this is how it is right now, but it's not going to be this way forever." And it's really hard to see that sometimes. You're like, "Yeah, but this is the stuff that I'm in. I can't even imagine a different future." And then a couple of years later, I'm cycling, traveling across the country, doing all these things, right, that I wasn't able to do at that time. And I have full faith that you will be as well, Megan. It's just hard to see in that moment sometimes. But I think it's just a good reminder to step back and realize that maybe we didn't choose situations, but I don't ever want to be a victim. I kind of want to take ownership of the situation that I'm in and just try to make the best of it. And so that reminds me also, I have in my book, I wrote 3 questions to ask anytime you're facing a big challenge. I've actually expanded that to 5 questions that I've presented in organizations. The first is, what's great about this? So looking for the silver linings. You mentioned something that's come out of this, the same thing I said, have said a lot about the pandemic, which is that it shut down my work and I wasn't necessarily making as much money, but I got to spend a lot more time with my kids because I was traveling a lot before that. And if this allows you to spend more time with your kids, that's something that you're almost never going to regret, as most probably older parents would attest, right? You don't get that time back. Number 2 is what can I learn from this, which is a really good question to ask anytime your challenge is from your own mistake, which happens quite a bit. For example, yesterday I took my son skiing with a friend and his son, and we drove 2 hours and we arrived at this place, and for some reason my phone was dead. And I didn't know the name of the ski school where I had registered the kids for class. I didn't have my ski passes, they were on my phone. I was like, "Oh." First of all, it's a good reminder how much we rely on our phones for everything that we do. But second of all, I was like, "Oh, this could have been easily remedied if I had just sent that information to my friend as a backup ahead of time because his phone was working." So there's a lesson. What can I learn from this? Yeah, this stinks, but at least I can learn from this situation. The third one is, what does this make possible? And I think it's interesting that a lot of times I talked about turning challenges into opportunities. A lot of times our challenges can turn into opportunities. And you mentioned earlier that I hosted a conference. The one that you were to speak at in Orlando was going to be the third one. The first one I was planning with my friend Bennett Phillips in 2019. So we had this conference planned for November 2019. And there was a wildfire that came into town in Santa Rosa, California, and they evacuated the hotel. Tell us a week before we're not going to be able to do the conference. We very luckily were able to reschedule the conference for January, and somehow with the big name keynote speakers we had, they were all available to come speak in January, other than one, I think, didn't make it. But that's actually because she had an injury, not because of a scheduling conflict. So you're not the first speaker, by the way, to not make it to the think tank conference because of a last minute illness or injury. But anyway, I bring that story up because there were a few people that bought tickets to the November date that weren't able to make it in January, but there were also quite a few people who weren't coming in November, but then bought tickets and came in January. And some of those people have become clients and good friends of mine. And I never would have met them if that wildfire had not forced us to postpone the conference. And I'm sure there were some horrible things that happened and maybe people lost their homes. And I certainly don't want to lose sight of that. But for me, there were new opportunities that were created that never would have happened if it wasn't for that. And I think that that can happen from a lot of challenges we face. I created the document that's on my website to help people that are going through cancer. You can go find it at andystorch.com/cancer. I created that to help other people. That's an opportunity that's come out of going through this challenge. And I think there'll be opportunities that come from yours. The other two that I've created later are really about taking a look at what is within your control and what's not in your control. So how can I take ownership of this situation? How can I make the best of this situation? So again, you probably didn't choose it, but how can you make the best of it? It's probably not sitting around complaining. Not that you don't have a right to be frustrated and upset. I would be too. But at some point, you got to kind of say, okay, what am I going to do to make the best of the situation and set a good example for my kids? And I know you're doing that. And I try to do that too. And again, it doesn't mean emotions are not valid, that you can't have moments of frustration and cry. I did too. But at the end of the day, like that's not necessarily going to help us. So we still have to do the things that are going to help us get better. And I know you're doing that. I did a lot of things, like I said, going through that cancer experience, from meditation to a lot of holistic approaches to journaling every day, gratitude, things that I knew would help me in addition to doing chemotherapy and things that doctors wanted me to do. And I think that was very, very helpful to me, both from a biological perspective and a mindset perspective, to get through those hard times.
Well, and we know our mindset is so deeply connected and with our physical health as well. And honestly, like it's been like stories like yours, you have been so public about the things that you've gone through, but also like your active practices every day. So like if you're not already following Andy on social media, definitely worth the follow, because especially like I love watching your Instagram stories because you just do such a good job of exemplifying like what it looks like to live an intentional life and
Mm,
what you choose to do. And I'm sure not every day is perfect. No one's is, but you
yeah.
actively choose like how long is your Duolingo streak right now? I'm like actively invested in your streak.
Well, to be fair, and I use Duolingo every day, as do my wife and kids. And it's nice because we all do it, so we hold each other accountable. Like every night, it's like, "Have you done your Duo before bed?" And my kids are both over 200 days, and I think mine's at
Wow.
like 541 or something like that. But I will say, to be fair, Duo does give a lot of grace. So if you miss a day or two, if you've been doing it for a while, they give you like streak freezes. I think if you miss like four, they're like, "Okay, you're done." But I've missed 1 or 2 days here and there, and it's given me some grace. I did lose a streak when I was first at like 100 or something, and I had to start over because I was traveling or whatever. The one I'm actually more proud of is I use Calm for meditation, and I started that in 2016, and I missed a couple days, but the last one was, I think, 4 years ago. And so my streak there is like 1,700 something days in a row. And there's no
Wow.
grace on that platform. You miss a day and you're out. You got to start over. I remember the last one I missed. The thing that gets you is the transatlantic flight going from the US to Europe, because it's overnight. And then you get there and you're like, oh, I'm in the day. Because my habit is first thing in the morning. So you don't
Right.
have that morning. So I remember I went to London for a conference, and then I went on with my day, and then I went to bed and I got up the next day and I was like, no.
Unless
But that also is a good sort of mindset practice to be able to face those like regrettable challenges and be like, okay, I'm just going to start over. It reminds me of like another opportunity to practice that, which luckily we don't experience as much anymore, is when you create the document and you write for 4 hours and then you don't save it. And you're like, oh no, I lost everything. Well, now I get to do this again. Luckily with, the advent of the cloud, we don't face that as much anymore. But that did happen for me the other day. I recorded like a solo podcast episode right after you and I were messaging about making mistakes with podcasts, Megan. And for some reason, it didn't save. And then I recorded again and it didn't save. And I was like, cool, this is an opportunity for me to do it again and get even better. And now I'm going to do it again. And those experiences can be frustrating, but they can also be opportunities for us to practice our kind of mindset about life and say, yeah, this is annoying, but maybe it's just a lesson or maybe it's just an opportunity for me to do something differently.
Yeah, well, and I love that you're holding, like, 2 opposing emotions at the same time. Yes, this is frustrating. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna pretend like it's not. It is frustrating, and I'm also gonna choose optimism at the same time. I'm gonna choose action. I'm gonna choose, like, feeling grateful for this opportunity, even though
Yep.
those are very conflicting emotions typically, like, holding both of those at the same time, I think is super important, and the one last thing I'll say in that too that I think is just so beautiful about the things that you talk about that I think the more that I go through things in life too that I think about too is if I really zoom out, a lot of what I think about is like, this is all just part of the story of my life. And
Mhm.
I get to write parts of it. Parts of it I are forced upon me, but
Yep.
I get to choose to write every day how I respond to each chapter. And it's just part of who I'm becoming every day.
Yep.
And some of that's inside of my control, some of it's not. But if I can just be who I wanna be in the moments that are in my control, or at least
Yeah.
try to, like, that's what's really beautiful. So,
I think that's right. And I also, the mindset stuff, people ask me sometimes like, okay, how do you develop the mindset to be able to handle those really big challenges sort of with grace? And to me, I think it's a lot of study and reading. As you know, I'm big into Stoicism. I read the Daily Stoic every day by Ryan Holiday. I think it's also practicing in the smaller moments because there are so many things that we tend to get upset about that we don't really need to get upset about. Because if you think about it, it's not really that big of a deal. And I'll give you another example that's very current. That I take my daughter to school every morning. And this morning we got to school and realized that we forgot her backpack. And I was like, well, can you just go into school without your backpack? And she's like, no, I can't go to school without my backpack. And I was like, okay, well, then I guess we're going home and getting your backpack, and then you're gonna be 30 minutes late to school. And I think in that very moment, I was frustrated. I was like, this is extra time. You're gonna be late. But then when you just take a step back, it's like, it's not that big a deal. Like, so she's a little bit late for school. It's one day out of like thousands or whatever that they go to school. And it's an extra 30 minutes out of my day. And maybe I get to spend a little bit extra time with my daughter that I wouldn't have got to spend before. So and life still goes on. The other example I often give is like when cars pull in front of you in traffic, we have this thing like, oh, that car cut me off. And people get so angry because they take it as like a personal affront, as if this person is like out to get you, when in reality, they're just like in a hurry and they probably didn't even see you. So, can you practice giving those people grace because you've probably cut people off too and didn't even realize it? I know I have, maybe on purpose from time to time. And
different
so I just try to just take a step back and be like, okay, maybe that person's in a more of a hurry than I am. Let them in. It's not that big a deal. And if we can practice that in those moments, then we'll be more equipped to handle the bigger challenges when they come in life.
I love that. Thank you so much for this conversation. This has been amazing. Let's do a couple of quick speed round questions, and then we'll wrap it up and make sure people have information on where to get a hold of you, okay?
All right.
If you could instantly master any skill or habit, what would it be?
Well, for me, I think it would be learning languages. It's become obvious to me that it's more natural to some people than others. And it's always been a struggle for me. And as you mentioned earlier, I moved from the US to Spain. I live in Spain now. I don't speak Spanish fluently. I have a little bit and I'm taking classes and I'm studying, I'm learning, but it's been very slow. And I'm just amazed when I meet people who speak three, four, five languages, which is a regular thing here in Europe. And I'm just blown away. And I think, well, so this is an interesting thing. I think something I tell myself is that, some people just have that ability and I don't. But I also wonder if that's a limiting belief that holds me back too. I think we do
Mhm.
that to ourselves a lot. And so I try to put that aside and say, well, whatever it is, I'm going to find the best method for me and I'm just going to keep moving forward and learn, even if it's harder for me than for others, which I think it may be, but that's okay. Like I'm just going to, go through it and do it. The other one I would say is like, for some reason, I've always had a not the best memory in my whole life. I forget a lot of things, and I wish that I had the superpower, especially since I read so many books and listen to so many podcasts. If I had the superpower to recall everything that I read and listened to, that would be amazing. I'd be the best. I enjoy having conversations with people. I might be the best conversationalist on the planet, or maybe it would be bad. It would turn me evil because I'd be so, you know,
You would know
uh,
everything.
yeah, I'd be like, "Oh, yeah, I know the answer to this. I've already read this," and so maybe it's a good thing. I don't remember. I don't know.
That's so funny. Okay, last question. What is one thing you wish you could change about our world right now?
I was gonna say something about people leading with more curiosity or empathy. I actually will take it a step back and just say, I wish people just cared more about each other and our planet. Like a lot of people say they care, but like really just cared about each other. Of course, we're still going to have our differences in politics and financial and approach to different things, but like if we just cared more about each other and could put differences aside sometimes, I know it's a cliche, but it would make a big difference. That's for sure.
It really would. I love that. Perfect note to end on. Andy, if people want to learn more about you or your book, where's the best place to get in contact with you?
Well, the book is called Own Your Career, Own Your Life. It's available on Amazon. If you want to just get some free resources like a summary of the book, my morning routine, the 5 questions to ask anytime you face a big challenge that I mentioned, that's all on my website. Go to andystorch.com/bonus, I think. Go to andystorch.com and click on bonus resources. You can download all of those things for free. My cancer guide is also on there as well. If you happen to be going through that or experiencing or know someone experiencing cancer. And I'm pretty active on LinkedIn as well as Instagram, I guess, if you want to come connect and follow along. Thanks again, Megan, for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here and for being so open. And this was a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today on Changed. I hope this story sparks something in you. Maybe a reminder of your own growth or a new perspective on where you're headed. Remember, change doesn't have to be something that you're scared of. It's an opportunity to become more of who we're meant to be. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, and leave a review. Your story is unfolding and we can't wait to see where it takes you. Until next time.